cartoon, there is this special moment when the young princess is hiding in the forest with the dwarves. The poison apple has not yet come her way, and she is so happy. She dances and she sings, and the birds and animals of the forest surround her and share her joy. They frolic and gambol at her feet, and everyone brims with happiness. The reason that time of sweet innocence and perfect harmony often comes to my mind whenever today's gospel story is told is because this is a favorite for many, including for many artists, this story. I've seen several pictures based on this verse. There is Jesus, tall and fair. Again with that gleaming, wavy long hair. He's got to use cream rinse. Don't know where he got it in first century Palestine, but he has to have done it to have hair like that. And a peaceful, serene smile. Sometimes if you're going for the Western European 1950s version of Jesus, we got the big brown cow eyes, you know? He radiates love and tenderness as he gently cradles a child in his arms. In those scenes, all is right with the world. The innocent and the unspoiled, the little children, all are welcome in the kingdom of God. Cue the bird chorus, you know? Did you do that?
Take the word, it wasn't a crow.
Yeah. I gotta watch out with you. Whoever welcomes one such child in my name welcomes me. And whoever welcomes me welcomes not me, but the one who sent me. It's a beautiful picture. But I don't think it's the one that Jesus is trying to share with us today. Because the 21st century view of childhood has little relation to the reality of first century Palestine. Children in the time of Jesus were not considered innocent or unspoiled. They were not protected in the way that we shelter our young ones now. Instead, until they were full grown, children were considered on a par with slaves. They had no inheritance rights until they reached maturity. As it was, mortality rates were so high that nearly 3/4 of them never reached the age of 17. If they did, 70% of those would do so already having lost one parent. As one scholar put it, childhood in antiquity was a time of terror. In every way, kids were the weakest, most vulnerable members of society. We might remember what Jesus had said just before he's cradling this child in his arm. He said, whoever brings the least of these. Kids were the least of these. They were the first to suffer from famine, war, disease, and dislocation. Instead of our image of trusting, imaginative, and delightful youngsters playing at the knee of a gentle Jesus, they symbolize those with no social status and no legal rights. A child was a non-person, totally dependent on others for nurture and protection. One could not expect to gain anything, either socially or materially, from kindness to a child. Therefore, it's almost impossible to recapture for us just how shocking Jesus is being this morning. He sat down, that's a sign that he's teaching with authority, and he picks up a child. Whoever welcomes one such child in my name welcomes me. And whoever welcomes me welcomes not me, but the one who sent me. The child in Jesus' arms should have been with the women, not hanging around the teacher and his students. Some scholars suggest that this little one was enslaved. For the disciples crowded around Jesus, his declaration that those who received Jesus received God would not have been a surprise. The culture believed that. Everybody knew that a person's emissary was to be viewed as like the one who had sent him. That's the way they saw things. However, to insist that receiving a child might have some value for male disciples is almost inconceivable. Once again, Jesus is turning everything upside down. Traditionally, we hear this story telling us that children are to be welcomed in church. Looking at this through the lens of first century Palestine, that is still the understanding, but not because they are innocent or trusting. It's because in the world they inhabit, they have no value. Greatness in the kingdom overturns all of our understandings of worthiness and honor. You know, I think this is particularly hard for Americans who spend their lives striving. In our society, so much of our value is based on what we do, how much money we have, how much power we wield, and even, if we can, keeping certain people away from having the money and power because it's so important that we want it. Thinking about the others in the ways that Jesus asked us this morning is exactly opposite to the way our culture operates. Yeah, we do pay lip service to the idea that the first shall be last, so long as we do not have to put that to the test of accepting someone who we consider a real outsider. The theologian Karl Barth talked about radical acceptance this way. Think of every human being, even the oddest, the most villainous, or the most miserable, as someone to whom Jesus Christ is brother and God is Father, and deal with him or her with that assumption. Sometimes it helps us to put a name or face to this, to get a sense of how much Jesus is challenging us this morning. So who would be the least valued person in our culture? The answer may be different for each of you. Maybe a homeless person in the grip of mental illness, not valued in our culture. Or a prisoner locked away in maximum security jail. Or maybe someone who spends their time preying on the weakness of others. A human trafficker, a sex trafficker. A serial killer. A dictator who oppresses whole countries. A terrorist. Here's another approach to envisioning someone that might embody what Bart is saying. There's a whole raft of theological writing considering this, which identifies Adolf Hitler as the modern embodiment of evil. Therefore, maybe he would be the least valued. Can you imagine Jesus saying to Hitler, "Come unto me"? To update it a little, although this is getting a little dated too, Osama bin Laden. So think of your person, the one that comes to mind as the most villainous or miserable in your head, like Bart said. You've got somebody in mind?
Yeah.
Now take that person and think about him or her as someone who can call Jesus brother and God Father. You can claim those relationships. Jesus is your brother. God is your parent, with all the heavenly parent. And so can that person. So now, as Bart said, knowing that that person is beloved of God Let your attitudes and actions toward him or her be guided by that. Does that change at all the way that you think about them? How about your neighbors or your colleagues, your friends or your enemies? How do you relate to them with that idea? Do you treat them all as the beloved of God? Because that's what Jesus is teaching us this morning. Do you want to be great in the kingdom of God? Find the person who you value the least. Think of someone who cannot do anything to help or benefit you in any way. No money, no status, no power, no strings to pull. Then look again and say hello to the emissary of God.